Hello, welcome back in the new lecture, guys. In this one, we'll finally start coding. So we are in further waiting, open our coding editors, and let's navigate in our project folder structure. So I will introduce you a couple of folders, very important to you, and then we'll be talking about React Native architecture, just very simplified one. Okay, so let's take a look on these folders and the files. So what's important here? We have here a TypeScript configuration, very simple one. So this is a TypeScript configuration, just specifying how can we use the TypeScript and what TypeScript rules we'll be using. Not really something that we need to worry about right now. Then we have a package.json, which will says what packages we have installed, what packages we dependent on. So you can see here dependencies and development dependencies. So all these packages we need to have installed in order to run our React Native applications. So when you will go to your project folder and you will run npm install command, you will go here and you will run here npm install command. Install this will take a look in your package.json folder. It will take a dependencies, development dependencies, and it will install them from with the Node package manager. And all these packages will be listed in Node modules folder. Okay, package.log.json. Here is also all of the packages that are installed, also dependencies of these packages. So this is a more descriptive view. Then you have listed all the dependencies, exactly what versions are installed and from where they have been downloaded. Okay. Okay, that this is really not important files for you guys. So now let's take a look at the Babel config. So these are specifying what version of a JavaScript we are using. Okay, then we have app.tsx, that's a very important file. TSX files are basically JavaScript files. I should say JSX files is a special syntax that applies for React applications, where you can specify your application as the component, either functional component or the class component will be going with the functional components, and you can basically write everything with like HTML syntax, but in the background, all of you writing is just a pure JavaScript. There is no HTML at all. If you see these pointy brackets, everything here is JavaScript is called JSX. Okay? But in this case, TSX, because we will be using here TypeScript, we can specify also types for every variable or for a function for every value we'll be using. Okay, so that's our main file here, app.tsx here. Then we have app.json, some additional configuration of our application. If we need to do something here, I will be talking about this later. Okay, but for you to know, yeah, just here, name of our applications, version of our application, what's the default orientation of our application, then what splash screen we are using. So splash screen is this icon we are displaying before our application is loaded, and so on. So this is just some metadata for our application. Okay, getting your file, you don't need to worry about it. So all of these files and folders that will be not pushed to GitHub repository if you will decide to push your project to GitHub. A Node module, as was mentioning, there are all the folders and all the packages from package.json that has been installed. Assets folder, just some static files as images. Expo shared is just expo related files and folders. So expo related environmental files that are required in order to launch our application in expo. We don't really need to worry about these folders because we'll be not touching them at all. What's important for us is for now app.tsx file and our TypeScript files. So guys, just very, very quick introduction. What is a React Native? It has in the name native. So it should help us to create a native application, and that's also what the React Native says. We can create with the JavaScript, basically, with this JSX syntax, truly native applications. I need to say they are not truly native applications because in the end we are coding in a JavaScript, so there is a little bit catch. But let's see this catch in this here, so I can draw here. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are using React Native. We are using React, right? So we are writing a React, which is basically everything is in the JavaScript in a background. So we have our JavaScript. And I cannot draw here. Very interesting. 1 second, guys. All right. Okay. So edit, and now I can. Okay. So we are writing everything in a JavaScript. So that's our JavaScript here. So JS, I will write here. You can imagine this is also your React Native. React Native. So this code what we are writing. Okay, that's our JavaScript domain what we'll be writing code. What really happens, it's that when you're on a device, on a real device or in a simulator, you are really creating truly native components to the operating system and the device you are currently on. So if you're on Android, you are creating a native Android components, and when you are on a iOS device, iPhone, you are creating really the native components in the iOS environment just with the JavaScript. So here you can here this is a native domain to your phone. Okay, so here is a native. Here is a truly native domain. Okay, maybe it is really confusing that I'm writing React Native. Here is a native. So what I mean here by the native, here is the truly native application written, or the native code, which is in the case of iOS, it would be base C, or it will be Swift. All right. In the case of Android, it would be Java or Kotlin. All right. Okay, but we need to worry about this. What is basically happening in our code, what we need to render or we need to display is going through the messages. There is something called a bridge here in the middle. So there is some bridge layer in the middle, and you are sending through the bridge JavaScript messages. So basically, you are just you are sending some JSON string messages to the bridge to the native domain. Okay, so here I will send the instructions to the bridge that I should render. I should create some components on the screen. So for example, in my application, I don't have any application currently. So if I have some device, I should maybe create some lists on the screen. Okay, so I should create here some list or some images on the screen. So this is from our JavaScript, from our code, we have written. We are sending the message in the string format here to the bridge and to the native domain. And in native domain, it will catch this message, and the native code is listening to it, and the native code is responsible to render out these list components, which will be the native components. Okay, so React Native get this message and says, okay, I need to render 3 components, so there will be instructions to render out these 3 components here on the screen. Okay, so your application is really truly native, but there is also this JavaScript layer that this is communicating to your native layer. Okay, so that's how it works on really guys, on the base level. There is much more to it, of course, but that's what you need to know. If you heard about some hybrid applications before, or frameworks, for example, Ionic is not really native application, but it's just simply a wrapper. So as you know, in most of your devices, I'll be talking about Ionic or hybrid applications. So you know the difference. So if you have Ionic or some hybrid applications, hybrid frameworks, it's working slightly different. There is nothing native there, but there is one trick that's happening there, and the trick is in that on your device, as you have Android or iOS, usually you have some browser application, right? It's also called a web view. So in the case of Android, I don't know what you have on Android, maybe Google Chrome or something like this. On iOS, you have Safari. So what Ionic and hybrid applications they do, they're using this browser application as their view. Okay, so if you have this browser application as the browser application in your browser, where you have normal, if you go to your browser application on your phone, you can tap your URL and this will display application for you, right? So this will display application for you. So for example, you are going to google.com. Okay, so this hybrid application using this these browser applications, they will just strip out this URL bar, so you will not use any URL bar. Okay, so you will be just using this browser wrapper, and inside of this you will be using technologies as HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, normal ones, as you creating the web, and you would render out everything through this. Okay, so you would render out everything as you would render out in the browser. So that's why it's a hybrid one. It just simply wrapper around your browser in your mobile device, and that's how in a nutshell, the Ionic and other hybrid application work. Okay, so it's also called web view. Okay, so just to recapitulate, in React Native, you have still JavaScript, but every messages are going to this bridge, going to the native domain, and native domain is responsible to render out elements. So everything is really truly native here. There's just this bridge of the messages going back and forth, also from a native domain. If something will happen, So for example, you are scrolling your UI, there is some event going on scroll, the message going to the JavaScript will send back a message to the native to render on the scroll and so on. In the Ionic or a hybrid applications, you're just simply wrapping around the web browser, existing one in your application, and you are using normal technologies as a HTML, JavaScript, and the CSS. Everything is just wrapped around the browser and rendered out as you would browse normal websites on the internet, but it's happening locally in your application. So guys, that's simple differences. I'm sorry for this not very nice image. That's gonna be it from this lecture, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will be more than happy to answer any queries, and let's see you in the next one. We'll be finally coding. Cheers.